What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. This is the Elder Scrolls podcast here with Michael and Drew, and I'm Scott. And this is the Hot Takes episode 3. On the last episode, we got you to put in some hotter takes and some of the more lore-related ones, because like hot takes, like things like, you know, we need classes back or something like that. We're kind of glazing over those. We've addressed them broadly, you know. Yeah, there's lots of improvements to the game mechanics, but I think the lore ones are the more fun ones to sort of talk about, and the more opinion-based ones. I also, guys, like, I know you really want to get your theories in there. Maybe we should do another theories sort of thing, the Elder Scrolls podcast, but definitely. You are using the like hot take. Here's my theory, and a lot of the time it's not really like a take,
and it's like 3 paragraphs long. And if we read it on the podcast and by the end of it, it's not even a good theory, we just wasted a lot of your time.
Yeah, but I did want to say, there was one that was like, it says this. I'll start with this. It's from Honore. Hot take. Clavicus Vile regrets that he didn't help in the creation of Mundus, thus isn't a revered Aedra. His plane being the Fields of Regret speaks to more than just his followers. He is lonely, which is why he splits himself into multiple parts, like Barbas. He envies not only the Aedra, but mortals as well. He is the most relatable Daedra to mortal men and mer. I guess part of that could be like a take is the most relatable or
That's
whatever,
a theory, but it was cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool theory, so I wanted to,
But here's an actual hot take. Jeremy Batar says, almost no armor from Oblivion even looks okay next to the other 2 main games. They all look like Halloween costumes for children.
So no armor from Oblivion.
I mean, okay. If you really take it, by just looking at Oblivion and you give it no credit for what they're trying to achieve in the art style, I can kind of understand where he's coming from.
Oh, I don't know.
But
it's a bit hard to say no armor. I mean, like Imperial Legion armor doesn't look like a Halloween costume for children, surely.
Yeah, I can get what they're getting at, but I mean, I don't agree entirely.
I agree when you put the helmets on a lot of them. Maybe if
I think it's just because it's cartoony. It's so cartoony that's the problem.
Yeah, it kind of... Yeah, I think it comes down... A lot of it comes down to the actual graphics of the time. It's the same as... I'm not sure if this was a hot take somewhere, or someone was saying basically that, like, they can't take Oblivion seriously because it's so goofy. Like, everything in it just...
Yeah.
Which is fair.
I think a lot of it isn't that goofy. I think it's just the faces. I mean, maybe that's a hot take, but I'm like, if you made the faces shaped a bit sharper and more like they were in Morrowind, but with Oblivion's graphical upgrade, I don't think I guess that would be as goofy.
You can apply it to movement, combat, ragdolls. Like, there's a lot of things about the game that are comically goofy.
I reckon I'm going to put a 50% like emphasis. The goofiness is faces.
Yeah, for sure. But like also like faces is like all you interact with for most of
Oblivion.
I know. It's like most of the game.
And it is also the comical kind of 90s sitcom camera zoom as well. You know, like when every time you engage in conversation with someone, it's like you're watching a scene from The Office. You know, and it's like you see their reaction that just goes boom right into their face, and it just looks a bit ridiculous.
I think, and also what like can double down with that as well is like it's got more like a colorful sort of whimsical palette. So if you combine that with like the sort of, you know, goofy looking heads and stuff, it looks a bit.
I think there's definitely a lot more at play than just because if you put everyone in helmets, the game would still be goofy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But yeah, so that wasn't the hot take we were addressing. But yeah, here's one that's like from Mustafa Demir. Hot take: Azura is the best Daedric prince lore-wise over any other. She has multiple mortal races that worship her, which no other Daedra can claim. Her spheres are mysterious and interesting. Her past influences and feats are insane when you consider it, like creating a prophecy by her own power that affected the fate of Nirn, cursing a whole race, creating a whole race. Her realm Moonshadow is probably one of the best places to spend your afterlife in. Her followers are granted warnings about bad events and are rewarded with compassion, and her enemies never get away with the bad shit they do. Like in the case of the Tribunal.
I mean, I'd immediately argue that you wouldn't want to spend much time in Moonshadow.
Well, like blinding light.
Yeah, well, not only the blinding light, but there's mention of the what is it? Like the waters smell like rich perfume, and you can imagine being in like your grandmother's house where there's just way too much perfume on to the point where it makes your eyes water when you go into
Yeah, the only thing is, I feel like
I mean, that doesn't sound too bad compared to some other realms, but if we're talking about Daedric princes,
well, yeah, I guess drowning in a sea of lava is probably worse than that. But you take my point.
I do like that they mentioned the fact that Azura actually gives her followers warnings. I quite liked that because I mean that's what I found when I did that video on whether or not you should worship Vaemina, and my hot take is that Vaemina is basically a scam artist, and that a lot of what she preaches, like you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics, like gold medal Olympic gymnastics, if you want to actually make what Vaemina is saying make a lot of sense. I mean, if she has the power of prophecy, she doesn't seem to be like telling her followers about it, or like, oh, there's omens and I can see futures and tell you things in your dreams and all of this stuff. Whereas Azura, she just does that.
I think Azura too is like she's like the best from the sort of like I like most. This is kind of like a roundabout logic, but like she is also like more casually worshipped or at least referenced and so on. She seems like the most accepted of all the Daedra. Like you'll find randoms, just people that seemingly like they're not dark elves or anything, but they'll go like by Azura like this. So it seems like
I mean she's very palatable.
Yeah,
you know she's not as extreme as many of the other ones. And by the way, on that topic of Vaemina, before people rush down to the comments and say no, Vaemina is the holy truth. Watch my video on it. It's very extensive, from every game, Elder Scrolls Online included.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can argue about the reasoning for putting it in Skyrim at all, but when you've got, most of the Daedric princes, if you go and find their shrines, it's secluded in some cave and it's got some weirdos around it. But then Azura in Skyrim, a place where Azura isn't exactly like the most revered, this gigantic, beautiful statue that almost seems to be holding up the world. And it's like, well, she almost appears very Adric to the layman.
Yeah, for sure. Because, that's the thing, too, to consider. It's like not your everyman person doesn't have, like, a comprehensive understanding of all the, like, different theologies and stuff like that, Like, so it's not like, getting hung up on Daedra technicalities if you have a Daedric prince that helps you. Or,
I mean, speaking of, Talos is technically a Daedra. All of his bloodline is dead. He is the ancestor to no one, and the elves are right to oppose calling him a divine.
Wait, I don't understand the Daedra part, though.
Well,
yeah.
They just said because all his bloodline is dead and he is ancestor to no one.
But like because that's not
bloodline
it's not
in general.
That's not solely what they mean. Like I know that's like that means like literally it's like Adra ancestor or Daedra not our ancestor, but it's not as literal as that, because then it's like for instance if you're a Nord, like everything that's not in your lineage doesn't all of a sudden become a Daedra to you, if that makes sense. Like just because you're not.
All I'm thinking of is that really old meme with that guy and the butterfly, and it's like, is this a Daedra?
Yeah. I don't think the Daedra sort of.
All right. How about this take? This is more. I just have to read it because it's funny. By Drift Indoril. I've been thinking about it, and my hot take is that Neloth is the only truly simpable character in Skyrim. I've seen lots of people who think he's rude and arrogant, and it makes me want to take them by the shoulders and shake them, because that's the whole point. He's arrogant, but it's backed up by skill, and he's rude, but it makes me want to run around and do his silly little jobs for a sliver of praise. There's no other character that makes me think I must please this person or I have failed.
Okay, I think I might have. Does it still go on?
Seeing him in Solstheim was really cool. It's like a nod to all the houses and the cherry on top of one of my favorite DLCs in the whole franchise. Also, Cicero is adorable, and you all are just mean because he's a bit creepy. Follower fight me.
I'm going to hijack this for a second to drop the hottest take that the Elder Scrolls community is just not ready for.
Oh.
You don't have to simp over everyone. There can be characters that are cool or interesting, even good looking, and you don't actually have to simp for them. You can just like them as a character. I mean, look, hey, sorry. I take it back.
You should.
Daddy Neloth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really get the simping. There is a thing in the community where people sort of like build out a sort of, whether it's Daddy Dagon or in this case Neloth or something, they need to have some object of their sexual desire exist within the Elder Scrolls universe. It's like
the community is way too horny. There's a problem. And
Yeah.
we need to root it out.
You gotta bonk them.
It's like instead of the advice of like touch some grass, it's like touch some genitals. Like to like these exist in games. These digital dark
Hey,
elves.
you never knew you'd be getting life advice when you clicked on this podcast to listen today.
Yeah. Okay, so here's one from Kukos. The oceans of Nirn are pathetically underused. There's like token mer elves and some sea monsters, and the dregs being a sentient race down there. So crazy awesome idea. I'd play the hell out of exploring the Nibbin with Topol, or just doing more of the empty sections of maps in existing games. I don't know how.
I think that's just a
take. I don't know how spicy that is, but because in a way, to be honest, I'd kind of say like sometimes it's like if you actually do consider like all of the slowed stuff, all of the Marima stuff, and all of the dreg stuff, it's kind of like listing off 3 really cool things in an ocean. Which when you consider what an ocean is, which is a giant body of water, there's not a whole lot that you can do with it usually. I feel like it's actually they've kind of done a fair bit, to be honest.
well.
Considering
Just in terms of Skyrim, the most disappointing, like I remember when I first played it just as a casual, the most disappointed I was in the whole game was just how sparse and empty the oceans were, or like how the sea and the rivers. It was just like a couple of salmon and maybe a slaughterfish, mud crab on the shore. That's about all there was to it. It would have been nice, especially with the Argonians having water breathing, that there to be more utilization of underwater areas. And I think we've talked about this before.
I fully agree. I think it was a massive waste of opportunity, and especially coming from Oblivion, which did have it to an extent. Obviously, it wasn't massive, but I know obviously in the Thieves Guild quest, going down in the water with the giant slaughterfish, opening that trapdoor, coming out into the ocean. I think even what's that? There's other quests where you would like drink potions of water breathing constantly to like go through like underground places. I even think in one of the Daedric Prince quests or one of the dreams.
I think
could have
getting
been
them.
Hanatir's dreams.
I thought it was
There's
getting
the eye as
eye,
well.
Yeah.
But was that the one that had the little like the caches of potions along the way? Anyway, there was just more opportunity, and it was a shame that you couldn't really use it for much in Skyrim at all. Like there was like a shipwreck, I think, with not much in it.
Yeah. But I think it's relative. That like it's a good idea, I guess, to have
and
more,
no
like,
creatures too. Like there's that mod that adds a lot of sea creatures, which is just nice.
I mean,
that out in the middle of nowhere, you can find a whale or something. I mean, when I say no sea creatures, yes, there are some small fish.
But like, I feel like the sea. To be
fish.
honest, I feel like the sea was more like the actual water areas, like with all of the little fish in there, plus slaughterfish, plus like hawkers on the coasts of the icy part and so on. The actual like aesthetic look of it was better. In Oblivion, it's often you walk across and there's a mud crab, and then it's just like a plain beach, and maybe find a slaughterfish.
I guess my point is not like the water areas; it's what's under the water. And if you go down to like, I mean, the top where the hawkers are, go to the top of Skyrim, you can dive super deep down, and there's like not even a fish. Maybe there are some, but like most of the fish you'll find is like kind of hopping in like Riften, you know, going into the lake there, and there's all the Cyrodiilic spade tails and everything going around.
Yeah.
Well, because one of the mods we use is that you know, they're fairly well designed. They don't have the greatest AI, but it adds dregs to the oceans as well. So if your character is actually deciding to swim underwater in the Sea of Ghosts, and it's like, you know, it's really dark, and you can just about see like 5 meters ahead of you through the murkiness, and you see the silhouette of a dreg, and then it starts attacking you. It adds such another dynamic of like, you can't just willy-nilly go wading through the ocean this.
That's what I wanted, at least. It's like, at least if I go deep enough, is there some huge fantasy shark that can just eat me or something? You know?
But I feel like they could add like one thing like that, and it probably wouldn't be, or maybe like an extra shipwreck or two. Like Oblivion wasn't some intense, like there's heaps of stuff. Like it's never going to be a focus.
We're not talking about Oblivion as much anymore. My point was more just there were more nooks and crannies to find items.
I think Morrowind had considerably more to see under the water. You know, obviously that there's still not a ton, but I specifically remember in areas going underwater and seeing a destroyed Boethia shrine and a Daedric, an old Daedric ruin that's, you know, the head of Boethia's taken off and it's under the water. I hope that's in vanilla, and
Do
I'm
be
not just
careful because I don't.
remembering
Yeah,
the
I
mod.
think that could possibly because there's so much of Morrowind that's added by Tamriel Rebuilt. So and they
Yeah.
do like go above and beyond with a lot of that stuff. So I'm not sure. I can't remember if that because it kind of blurs for me. Because
Well, I'm never wrong, so if I am wrong, let's just cut that whole bit and cut in now.
but they did have the underwater like the dregs and stuff underwater. But yeah,
Hey, this is a bit random, but speaking of that whole simp conversation from before, imagine an episode we did just going through the Twitter of smash and pass Elder Scrolls characters.
yeah, you could.
I feel like we need a guest for that. That would be funny with a guest.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like for every pass, you'd get some furious people. Doesn't matter who you're passing.
Fargo.
You could be passing Yagra and Bagan, and the Yagra and Bagan stands come out.
Yeah.
I don't know if this person's like, it's like, are you new here? But Strawberry Girl says, hot take. The Marima are truest descendants of the Oldmer. They left Aldmeris first, and Pioneer is most likely geographically closer to Aldmeris than Somerset is, probably having at least similar climate as compared to Somerset, which I would assume is pretty far to the north of it. The Marima would have changed less, and I mean, look at them. They have transparent skin and seem almost transformative. Doesn't that seem like Proto-Mer to you? I don't know if you've heard this, or we've had this discussion on a podcast as a theory, and then we made a video about it called, I think it was like the True Heirs of Aldmeris or something, as a theory. I guess I don't know how much of a hot take if you think about it. Like, we've already talked about it a lot, but to most people, maybe it might be a bit like strange, but I feel like it's a pretty fair take overall. But yeah, we've there's the theory video on the channel. So,
There's no Aldmeris anyway, so...
I'm going to be very open-minded about the next hot take I've got here. From Jeffrey Hoover. Atronach mounts are a good inclusion to the lore and make a lot of sense. Since it's explained in the lore that conjured bound armor and weapons are made by changing the shape of a Daedric soul into such items, it would make sense that you could shape the soul into other objects, like a horse. Look, I guess what I would say is I don't have a problem with summoning a mount, right? Like, I thought Arvak was really cool. And maybe that's a bit of a funny meme because it's like, these magical mounts in Elder Scrolls Online, and then it's like, Arvak mount.
I think ultimately
cool.
it comes down to the execution of it. If it feels like rarer or crazy, like I wouldn't be opposed to it if it's super rare. But the big thing is like you play ASO, you go around and everyone's on all of these like crazy mounts and they're all like colorful fire, and they really try and like put in the lore all of these reasons why these heaps of them exist for every kind of like, you know, here's your like sench rut made of like some like fungus kind of thing, and it's just so it's off tone, I think.
I suppose it's the absolute like volume that makes it feel silly. You know, the fact that every single animal basically can be a mount in a way. They turn it into one, and then every single mount has like 8 different variants, and it's all like, you know, the Blight variant, the Storm Atronach variant, the Fire Atronach variant.
But it kind of always like
why does it have... Okay, like even here, let's just be like smart for a second. If you were a conjurer, why would you want to sit on a flaming super hot lava thing?
Yeah, I mean,
do you know what I mean? Like, you would summon it in a different way, perhaps.
The main thing too is I feel like you could have... It seems kind of silly when they're like, here is my Storm Atronach camel. It's kind of like, you could, like, why wouldn't you have some unique Daedric sort of Storm Atronach kind of beast thing that's probably more, you know, efficient than a camel or something. Like most of the, you know what I mean? Kind of like something cooler. And more like, that looks like a Daedra as opposed to like, this is literally just a camel but made of Storm Atronach stuff or something like that, you know?
I tell you what, the Storm Atronach is one of the ones that I don't mind as much because it often has, like, it depends on the design, but it often has more of the, like, rocks on it with the electricity kind of inside it.
Yeah.
So, like, you can imagine it's more like, I don't know, less electric, but some of the fire ones just look like, even though you've got a saddle on it, it's like, I don't know, man, I wouldn't want to dangle my feet that close.
Also, if I'm gonna be pedantic and get into it from a very lore perspective, rather than just accepting the fact that ESO is what it is and it is what it is, and you just play it and suspend your disbelief. But if you really have this abundance of mounts that you can just summon out of the earth or whatever, it really changes the way you have to view all of Tamrielic society throughout history, because you wouldn't have... There wouldn't be, like, the cavalry wouldn't be an essential part of a battleground, for example, coming in from the flanks and driving into the infantrymen, because everybody's just going to have, like, everybody's on a mount, everybody's summoning it out of thin air. It's so easy. And it really, you can't justify the mount system without really just...
It's like you can have a bunch of like Nightbladey sort of characters sneak behind enemy lines and summon an entire cavalry and then like charge from behind or something like that. It's just...
That does sound really cool, but if it was a one-off, if that was some one-off thing on the timeline, but yeah, like you said, the problem is once it's done once, it's like, oh, that strat was good.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to do it.
If you go down the rabbit hole of like, a Daedric vestige can be shaped into anything, that's how we have bound weapons and armors. If there aren't limitations on that, like, it's incredibly difficult to get a solid spell that makes this work consistently. If you don't have that, then the possibilities are just so ridiculously endless that people are conjuring whatever the fuck they want constantly, the most ridiculous things that just destroy the world and all of that.
Yeah, because it's just like, let's just conjure a house. Why can't we conjure a whole city? Like, why would Telvanni like bother to like grow mushroom towers when they could just summon a Daedric house? Like, it's kind of...
Who wants to live in a Daedric house?
Yeah, or a Storm Atronach house or something. Like, as cool as it could sound, it just gets like, you can take anything as a good idea. Like, you've still got to like take...
So wait, who...
So
go on.
I was just going to say, you got to take things into like a full context of like a sort of like tone consistency and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes like, I don't know, it kind of just...
Whose take was that? Can you see?
What? Yeah, I said it was Jeffrey Hoover's take. What do you...
Jeffrey Hoover, maybe you should conjure a GF.
That's so rude.
Yeah. I'm kidding, mate. I'm kidding.
You should conjure some good manners.
Oh.
All right, next take.
All right, I've
got one for you, Scott. Sorry.
Okay, go.
Raven Echo 7 says, hot take. The Ebonheart Pact makes complete sense from a deep lore perspective, as all three races are products of Sithis.
No.
I feel like I've heard that one too.
I don't think... I
feel like I have as well.
The problem is with that is like, people don't exist in the way that like people exist in cultures and stuff. They don't exist from a deep lore perspective. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
They're not like, both attached. Sithis are like, that would... If they did, everyone would be like, we're all humans.
Or it'd be like a very fundamentalist Christian and Muslim being like, Allah, God, let's, you know what I mean? Like, obviously I'm simplifying things, but it's like there are divergences between cultures that are massive despite coming from a deep...
And I did see, and like there are people like posting like, well, in this example in history, like, these two people teamed up for whatever, like, alliance or whatever kind of time. And usually it's like there's a big crisis kind of thing. But I just think that how drastically different you've got the Nords opposed to the Dark Elves, just like ancient enemies. And like, fine, even if you want to indulge that for a second. But the Dark Elves who are literally allying with like the people they've been enslaving for so long, the Argonians doing that. Plus they've got like this hyper-religious theocratic kind of like government supported by tribunal gods. Like, why do the actual context of that scenario ends? They're not defending against anything. They're just
so mad.
They're just like, let's get together and take the Imperial City, like, because we don't want the others to do it. Why can't they just create like, even if it was like an actual like defensive pact of like, it could arguably make even more sense than it does if it was just like, let's just like defend ourselves here. But like the whole like, let's take the Imperial City, let's get involved in this Three Banners War. It's like, why? I still don't buy the reason. Why does Morrowind all of a sudden have to join this pact for defense reasons? You know what I mean? And it was in the lore before, in the previous lore, they beat the Akaviri invasion just fine by themselves. Why do they need this sort of like addition of like, oh, we had to do it to team up against the Akaviri and like, I don't know. I don't buy it. I think in the context of the Elder Scrolls and what they're doing or so on, it's not the best alliance. And look, at the end of the day, like we were saying, as a response to that, you're not the Sithis, just because it's like, all creations of Sithis or whatever, that component of things doesn't make reason like they should be allies. You know what I mean? Because I just don't think I can't imagine an Argonian going to a zealous Dunmer or something and reasoning that.
Yeah.
And technically under the tribunal gods, they're kind of more like they're not really like it's not like as aligned with a Daedric sort of belief anyway.
All right. Well, Samuel Robillard says, hot take, the player character having an innate ability, like being a Dragonborn, is better for the franchise. The majority of players aren't going to go through the trouble of role-playing a lore-friendly character, and having some sort of ability/prophecy encourages the player to associate with some lore. Also, on most initial/main playthroughs, people like working their way towards having some godlike power, which can be eased with these special abilities.
I mean, it's a hot take, and I get what you're
It's hot.
trying to say, but I think just from... Like, I mean, it worked fine in Morrowind and Oblivion, but the actual, I would just sort of say, is like making the godlike power, this sort of like given kind of thing, makes it feel less achievable. Even if it scales, like later on you get dragon aspect and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't feel like you really like worked hard to achieve it. Like achieving a godlike power or some sort of like build or whatever kind of thing at a high level always feels impactful when you sort of figured out how to do it and you worked towards it. Whereas if you're in a main story and it's just the process of giving you the power, it's not as engaging. I understand the lore thing, I guess, is a fair enough argument. But to be honest, with Oblivion, like you engage with whatever, like any story, arguably, is going to pull you into to some degree of the lore.
Yeah, I think as well, like it shouldn't really matter whether or not a person playing a game is lore friendly or not in their role playing. Like if they want to be, they're going to be, and if they don't know the lore because they're brand new, even if you make them Dragonborn, they'll probably have some silly backstory in their head that makes no sense because they don't know anything about Tamriel. And obviously when you make them the main a prophesized innate ability having character, you do have all these other issues like we've talked about before, where role playing is limited once this person does get into the lore. Like if you're trying to have this person get into the lore, well then I think they can still do that without having an innate power. Like you said, Scott, the main story can pull you into the lore of the game without having to give you superpowers, essentially. And then, you know, in new playthroughs, you'll always have these superpowers, and that's just something all the other players who do know the lore as well will have to deal with.
And like maybe it's just a sort of me thing or sort of us thing, or in terms of like role playing and stuff, but you're not even in intense role playing, but it does feel sillier doing menial sort of tasks when you're supposed to be recognized as a god, and then a companion's like whelp this or whatever. Like even from a role playing perspective, you have to like in the most recent Let's Play, it's like perfectly all makes sense. It's like a good job of doing it, but you do have to like sort of bend and make things happen or come up with all these extra reasons as to why. Like the main character in it at the moment is he's recognized Dragonborn and everything, all these godlike powers, he's Lord of the Volcar and all this kind of stuff. He's a vampire, but then he's like doing the Dark Brotherhood and like joining this little assassin guild. So I had to like create a reason for it, which all works. But if you're just, it does feel like a weird, so like joining the Thieves Guild can kind of feel like weird if you're practically a god and then you're like, I'm going to join and steal some coin, especially if you're like rich. It just, I don't know. I just find that the way that the godlike power sets the bar too high from the main story, I think, is my...
I guess a good way of looking at it is thinking of yourself in real life. I'm sure everyone listening has thought about, if I had superpowers, I would do this, or I would care less about, X, Y, Z. If you literally have superpowers, you can't really justify, or you can, but it's harder to justify having a more simple life or doing anything that doesn't involve super epic, utilizing all your superpowers to the nth degree activities.
I think in an RPG anyway, there's a few things, like in some of these vary and so on, but there's a few like sort of main appeals or things that sort of spur you on and keep the RPG fresh. So like one of the things is potentially can be like any like emotional interactions with characters or like story component, right? That's one part. The other part is going to be like, especially with like Bethesda games and so on, the way they're set out, is really the exploration. So you're going to see new areas. But the other part is like character growth and the climb. But if you basically just... If you just give them you go from novice now, all of a sudden you're just a master, you're just practically a god with all these dragon shouts and everything like that, super quick, the quicker you get to like the max level or like super powered god, the quicker that the sort of steam comes out of the game. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you would probably know this. Like the most fun period for me in any playthrough or something is generally like the early to sort of like, considerably before the late late game, but do you know once you're at that like late game stage where you feel like your character, like, what am I doing now? It's kind of, it doesn't feel like, because you've got no skills and stuff to do, you could clean up some extra quests, but do you know what I mean? Like it's
classic journey, not the destination mentality. It's that best like 15 to like 85%.
Yeah,
like
exactly. And you know what? Like in saying that too, if you make the journey shorter, well, then you're getting less of the journey. You know, so
I even think in Skyrim too, like getting 3 words of Fusro was such a game changer, because basically it gave you the ability to knock down almost any opponent.
Yeah,
and so that a lot of battles that would have been tougher in previous games, you could actually really, use that and be like, well, I'm just going to knock down every single person in the room and hit them with dual power attacks until they stand up. And then by that stage, they're already down to 10% health. And the recharge was pretty quick. Like, it wasn't too bad.
And at the end of the day, remember, like, for people listening, like, it's not against the concept of being able to achieve godlike power. It's just not making it easy or just handed to you. Because if it's handed to you...
Or default.
Yeah. But it's just that kind of, you want to work for it. It feels good when you work for it. Like, I feel like people would have been far more, like, excited rather than getting the Dragon Wrench shout or like, some final, even of the Fusrodar or something, when they've unlocked some crazy master summon, or they can summon 2 things now, or stuff like that. Feels like you've worked for it, and it's cool.
Here's a hot take, but you could have taken half of the shouts in Skyrim, turned them into high-level spells, which would have fleshed out the magic diversity a bit more, like things like Ice Form and stuff, still kept some of the coolest shouts as shouts, and then made learning the voice as this like side thing that you could go and follow, and it was like only for some characters and was really hard to achieve, but if you wanted it, you could get it. Yeah. Of course, I know that they would probably never put that much effort in, and, obviously they liked having all the word walls around. And look, it's just the way the game was made. The whole game was built to facilitate it. And it was fun. Like, we all enjoyed it. We're only talking from, like, a nitpicky perfectionist, what we'd prefer in Elder Scrolls 6 kind of
I feel
viewpoint.
like, arguably, if you wanted to, I think you still could make the Dragonborn story work out better if it took a long, like, prophecy, like, if it was a longer time to realize your powers and like to get them and access. So for example, like say you're like playing a solid thing and you're like right through the game, now you're finally like you unlock a shout or something. But it really is like you go kill your first dragon and then get a shout straight away. It's the same problem like a real common one. It's like in Fallout 4. You get power armor handed straight to you in a minigun, and you kill a Deathclaw, which is like one of the most like throughout the series, like whoa, scary! It's a Deathclaw, and you just rip it to shreds with a minigun that you just handed, and there you go. You got a full set of power armor. It doesn't feel like you're working towards it anymore. And it
compare that to say Fallout 3, when you get your first set of power armor is the most insane thing, and then when you come across a Deathclaw for the first time, it's the most scary thing. Whereas in Fallout 4, both of those experiences are given to you in a fairly, set up sense that you can't lose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's nice to be able to lose to a Deathclaw, like going into Quarry Junction or something, getting shit on by a Deathclaw it's kind of, it's part of the experience.
Even needing power armor training as like a perk or a thing to acquire before you can wear it in previous games was cool. Like, I mean, look, the power armor in Fallout 4 was way better. You go play any of the previous Fallout games, you feel like you're running around in a tin can. But if it feels so much cooler, make it harder to get, and it will feel like even more special.
That's like, even if that's the other thing too, it's like the harder to get. But if there was a power armor training sort of like perk thing or something, even so, say you could get in it and you could move it, but you're like slow or weird jagged movements or something, like because you haven't learnt how to use the machine yet as intended or something like that. But here's a fiery take. He proclaims, Darren Lopez, Manamarco did nothing wrong after the plane meld. He was humbled by the vestige and Baal, and with his knowledge obtained during the Mythic Dawn, he saw how fragile reality was. He wanted to show as above, so below, meaning mortals can achieve permanence just like the gods. Necromancy was his way of extending a mortal's place in the world. During Daggerfall, he is not villainous, and during Oblivion, his cult only targets members of the Mages Guild, which are out to exterminate the necromancers with force. I don't know if you can really get Manamarco did nothing. Well, I guess like if you're saying Manamarco did nothing wrong after the plane meld, that's the thing. But it's like if it's the sort of like tagline, did nothing wrong except this and this, and like
except for the really bad things he did. But we'll start here. The year after.
Yeah.
But I guess like for what he's saying though, I kind of understand.
I mean, okay, fine. And I know there's all the theories about the one in Oblivion being an imposter, but assuming that he's not an imposter, just for sake of example, how about this dialogue? Oh, my dear, I didn't mean to imply that you have a choice. I will make you another in the long tradition of worm thralls and take my time in studying you. Your very soul will be forfeit to me. Like, I mean, I don't know. He doesn't sound like he's just, I just have a different viewpoint. I see things differently.
He's a bit edgy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add, it's not exactly like just some sort of like self-defense vibe against the Mage's Guild.
He wants power. He literally says, he says, power, my dear friend, I seek power, and so I acquire and study those who have some degree of it. But then he does do the philosophical thing where he's like, we are after the same things, your guild and I, yet you worry about good and evil and do not accept that they are manifestations of the same thing. So you brand me a villain and make vain attempts to destroy me. I watch and I wait, and I collect you when you come for me. Instead of drawing Traven out, I have received you instead. Perhaps I shall personally go and collect him when we are done here. It's kind of like he mixes that like, oh, we're all just the same after the same thing, but then like, I'll come collect you. Like, I don't know. Bit weird. They could have, if they wanted to play up the like, I just have a different viewpoint, they could have like really stuck with that, but they seem to have interspersed it with almost like comically evil lines in addition to the ones that are like somewhat idealistic.
Here's one for you from Mary Raymer. Here's a hot take for you. There are so many great choices of men to marry in Skyrim. Not, I'm a female IRL and I usually play a female in game. There are no exciting choices. The one-eyed beggar in Solitude, give me a break.
But believe it or not, I'm actually not an expert on which men are marryable. So I'm going to bring up a list.
I think everyone ends up going for like Mercurio and stuff. That's his name, right?
Yeah.
The mage for hire in the Bee and Barb in Riften.
Yeah.
20 best husbands and how to marry him. Hey, but that's the point. That's the point, right, of the hot take.
Maybe I'm agreeing.
Like Athos, the skinny dark elf in the Companions Guild. Belrand, some old balding man. I mean, Gregor looks all right. I mean, he's a bald, strong Nord, whatever. Halber, Ironfoot, nah, not that one. Calder, big mutton chops. Depends if you like Argon. Stenvar, if you're into this. Mercurio, I think, is fine. That's probably why everyone goes on.
I'm not a fan
of Mercurio.
Yeah.
No, mate. I mean, I don't think I'm the best person to judge. I'm just saying that, it's some younger option with hair who's not balding. Like, I'm not saying we're talking like star options. Again, point of the hot take, right?
Michael, there's Scouts Many Marshes. He's an option.
Yeah. Roman, I can really see what
all these pictures here on that 20 best thing. They're all like modded and stuff with different outfits and stuff.
You can marry Farkas or Vilkas. Onmund.
Nah,
I
can't marry
Argus
both.
the Bulwark is the best husband. That's what I'm reading a list, by the way. These aren't. I'm
gonna say. Then the hot take, like I'd probably agree. Just skimming that list, there's nothing particularly exciting, is there?
Well, I mean, who are good options anyway?
That's what I was
like. For example, if you could like Brynjolf or something, is like a character, like he's got like a bit of like charisma and stuff.
Devlin,
sort of,
yeah,
or
Delvin,
Devlin. But yeah, like I guess so. I guess there's not a lot of good options.
Then, I mean. To be fair, but it's not like the options for either, like,
What about Japanese Harken?
Nah. Okay, I think it is. It's true. Yeah, I agree with the hot take.
Cool. Well, how about this hot take? Wolf like chaos. Hot take. Coda has been a detriment to the community, especially when it comes to new fans trying to learn the lore. So many lorebeards treat Coda as 100% canon when in reality it's glorified fan fiction. Yes, it came from a former developer, but that doesn't mean we should treat it as gospel. It's beyond frustrating when I see people talking about it as if it's the deepest lore ever.
I don't agree that Coda is terrible, but I do agree that on a lot of different forums, people will just say things as if they're true. And it's not even like necessarily like Kirkbride stuff. It can be their own headcanon. There are a lot of people who just throw around like, oh, like on the reanimated undead video, right, that I made, people were commenting like, oh, someone commented the skinned hound has Daedra blood, and it had like 35 thumbs up because they wrote it in a way that sounded smart and legit. And then I replied to them saying basically like, source, bro, like where's your source? And they didn't have it. It's just zombie blood mentioned and Breton blood mentioned in some notes of Real Minas, but in general, that's common. People just say stuff.
If we're talking about Coda just in a Kirkbride sense and not the rest of the community sense, I think I can totally understand the complaint that you don't want to deal with all that weird extra lore that isn't technically canon anyway. But I think the memes and the kind of like the way people view the Elder Scrolls lore that comes as a result of that, like the craziness of it all, actually attracts people more than it pushes away. So I think in terms of him just saying it's detrimental, I don't think it's detrimental because I think it brings more people in and it separates it more from the more generic fantasy universes.
Yeah, like you can also, like, people can think about it however they like in their head. Like some people, like that Coda stuff is really appealing to them, or some of the extra sort of weirder parts of the lore that it appeals a lot to them, and then they get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But at the same time, you can enjoy it just as like kind of exactly what you experience as, and not have to consider all of the other parts of it. And that's the thing. It kind of almost feels like, you know, these are headcanon-y type things, but like their usefulness, I think, is still...
I guess the problem comes when people are all trying to have a discussion and they say, what do you think of this? I think it's that. And then they have someone come along with a kind of like snobbish attitude and go, oh, like, you're wrong. How don't you know it's this? Which it actually isn't. It's just from out of game, Coda stuff. And it's like, well, you can't really be treating people like that. Like again, I disagree to treat it like gospel. Yeah, but absolutely. In the same way, I can kind of agree that we shouldn't treat the Elder Scrolls actual lore as gospel in general, in the sense that having theories and unreliable narrator and all this kind of stuff is cool. So there's a fine line, but I can definitely, I guess, understand the sentiment of that hot take. But I wouldn't say it's detrimental or terrible or anything at all.
Yeah, I agree. So here's a hot take that's in the reverse of an earlier one. Zolcom, I think, would be how you say it. But a hot take. Azura is objectively a terrible god and no one should worship. She is someone who can do everything right. Someone who you can do everything right and she will punish you. With the tribunal, 3 people betrayed her, so she responded by punishing the entire race, and she couldn't even affect the 3 people she was actually punishing unless they allowed her. With Arena, the Dunmer devoted her entire centuries-long life to Azura and sacrificed everything to appease her, and if the player sides with Azura in her quest in Skyrim, she straight up tells Arena that she will not give her any more visions and abandons her. Azura is all take and no give. She demands your absolute love and a devotion, yet will abandon and punish you at any time for no reason. So why would you ever want to worship her? I don't think it's like for no reason. There's always like some kind of reason, but she is like a narcissist. Kind of like, and it's like we've talked about this before. If you are like fueling her ego basically as a god, like your life is probably going to be pretty sweet. But yeah, she can be very vengeful.
Yeah, it's an important thing to consider when talking about worshipping the Daedra, is that maybe if you just come across someone in real life who's a bit of a narcissist, you're like, okay, I don't really want to associate with them, but like what she's compared against makes her look pretty good. You know, like there's not a lot of stiff competition for deserving your worship if you had to worship a Daedra. So I think the reason most people say, well, worship Azura is because it doesn't get that bad, really.
I mean, compared to Dagon, who's like, I just want to test you. Here's 2 Dremora, even though you did everything that I wanted you to do. Fight them to the death. Just do it. It'll make you stronger. You'll thank me for it later in life, son. You know, like that's the mentality, but with death on the table every single time.
Yeah, here's another. I'll just mention this one real quick. I don't like that this is a hot take. Jeffrey Perez says, hot take, FudgeMuppet's the best Elder Scrolls YouTube channel. Like, putting forth the idea that that's a hot take.
That's too spicy for this one.
Way too.
You are so wrong.
Yeah, but Jay...
I got to I want to mention this one, Josh Palacios. Hot take, the lore doesn't matter. The newest game setting is the only thing that matters. The old game's lore about it is irrelevant.
Man.
Well, I guess only insofar as it gets overwritten by the new law is what he's saying, I guess.
People get a buy-in though on something, like when you invest time in something and like you're into it, you're invested in the thing, and if all of a sudden that thing just kind of disregards everything previous, well then you're no longer invested in that thing. It's not a continuation of what you love. It's just functionally a reboot or change. You know what I mean? Like, I don't. And when they're getting to the law doesn't matter and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, theoretically, oh yeah, it's all fiction. But I feel like you can just follow this like nihilistic loop to the end. It's like, oh, what's the purpose of real life? Oh, nothing matters and all this kind of stuff, and reduce. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you give things meaning yourself. And even if that's like law or whatnot, like if there's a whole bunch of people invested in the law that are all, you know.
So, just a comment by Brady Ferguson. The map of Tamriel is crap. It's literally just a 3x3 graph of the races, except they forgot orcs.
Yeah.
I mean, like, geographically, there's a lot about Tamriel that makes no sense if you're looking at biomes and stuff like that, but you kind of just put up with it. I mean, like, there are weird things in real life, you know, that look like they were done on a fantasy map, but still, Tamriel kind of takes the cake.
It's not the most exciting map, I don't think, of all of them. I love it because it's Elder Scrolls or whatever, but it's like I think like there's, you know, just, yeah, there could be more interesting.
Hot take by Aaron Skeen. Michael needs to do a Let's Play similar to that of Scott's, but in Oblivion. I would love to watch that. I mean, I totally could do that, but I can't promise you that I'll have the same cinematic, beautiful openings in Oblivion. It's just a lot harder to film and to muck around with and to mod as well. But if you wanted an actual Let's Play, I totally could.
Do it.
Hit him with an actual
J Mel,
Daggerfall.
Hottest take. The Elder Scrolls provides us with too much information for us to make genuine lore hot takes. It's way too hard to make a lore hot take for the Elder Scrolls without injecting I think thing good/bad, because the Elder Scrolls provides the perfect amount of information to players. Either you know enough about the lore and how each story connects that any take is too accurate/plausible and regresses to being meh, or you don't know enough about the lore and your take is flat out wrong. The Dark Souls approach to lore is way better for hot takes since there's way more room to speculate. For example, Solaire is the Carthus sandworm cannot be disproven, even though, anyway, I don't understand that. But like, I think there is plenty of room for hot takes in the Elder Scrolls, and sort of, I don't think it does.
I mean, we're on part 3 of this series, so there must be something, even though admittedly there were some tepid takes. But I mean, Elder Scrolls has, I don't know, there's still plenty of stuff to talk about that, like, you can take sides on different things, or
yeah.
I mean, some of these takes we've read are funny because, like, some I've never heard or considered.
But like, I think on also like in terms of like the whole unreliable narrator thing already, like, it gives you a lot of information, but a lot of that information is contradictory or whatever. It's not just like what is right or wrong. Like, especially if it's like, oh, is Azura good or bad, right? Or like you know, weigh it up. Like, you can absolutely have a take that she's like a hot take that she's bad or whatever, and you can probably point to lots of examples that why she's so, or you know, you can do that with a lot of the gods and different culture things. Any of the political things, you can go like, House Slalu did nothing wrong, like they're actually really good or whatever. Like, I don't know,
Manamarco did nothing wrong.
Yeah, I feel like there's plenty of room to speculate, or like, you know.
Here's a take from Melissa A. Hot take: I don't hate Nazim at all. He's a snob, but he's harmless. He's a minor disturbance compared to characters like Delphine or Maven. He's like the Regina George of Whiterun. Absolute icon. And then the little emoji of like a shooting star after icon. I like that.
Nice.
I just said it for meme value. I think Nazim is a major disturbance in the community, but not in the game. You know, there's a problem when I post some really cool looking build on Instagram and it gets 900 likes. Then I post a picture of multiple Nazims in Whiterun and the crowd goes wild.
Memes are too powerful.
They love Nazim too much.
You should post Sheogorath saying cheese.
Oh, I should just to
get Sheogorath and
see.
Photoshop like that, like sort of like camera, like hands and a camera in front, and they're like, "It's not cheese, say cheese, corn 4K or something," and it's like that kind of.
I almost want to just as like a as a test, an engagement test.
Well, actually, there was.
I'll just put a PNG of cheese over the top of him, like a brie wheel from the shops, and just post it.
This isn't so much. I don't know if this was declared as a hot take, but someone that said that Sheogorath should be used to explore mental health and absurdist philosophy instead of just being comic relief. Which,
okay,
yeah,
I have a bone to pick, and we're not getting into this, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna say it. You're gonna cop it, and we're gonna move on.
Yeah.
Giga Chad.
But I really think that he wasn't portrayed in Oblivion as a whimsical cheese character. I think Elder Scrolls Online is what absolutely did it, and the community. I think there is enough dark side of him in Oblivion to basically say that they did a good job, and that they showed the cruel, scary, dark side of him plenty of times in dialogue. And that then, once they found out that people liked him saying cheese once or twice, it was not much at all in Oblivion, they put it in Elder Scrolls Online, they put it in the memes, they put it in the community, and they put it in, like, I don't know, it's probably in all kinds of places. I wouldn't be surprised if it's
But what
in
did he do
Legends.
that's so dark?
Oh, the whole kind of like
I'm gonna
use your
skip
entrails.
Yeah, but
and-
that's the only one I can think of. Like, I'm gonna skip.
But
rope
can
with
you
your
think
entrails.
of? But how much dialogue can you think of? I don't
But
want it to be like
everything's
one of those like tell me.
It's like,
tell me
haha,
the exact
like
quote.
Rolina
more the
Venom's my little
delivery.
hussy. Oh, she's such a sweet. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's a little, like, it doesn't.
I guess it definitely wasn't like constant whimsical cheese. I guess is my point.
I mean, like,
I think if you're talking about killing someone in a really like fun aesthetic way, that's not really getting into that dark side. I feel like I imagine the dark side of Sheogorath more like he's inconsolable. Nobody can dissuade him to do something horrific to someone for kind of like because he's being disturbed,
Like, if
not
they-
because it's like,
yeah.
oh, I'm gonna skip where you're on
like
trails.
if he's just like crying and crying and crying over something all of a sudden and so on, and then he declares that someone needs to be like crucified with their entrails wrapped around them or something, like that is a scary, unhinged part of it. And what's scary is when you actually have that flip, rather than just like, oh, I'll threaten you. Or I'll say a funny threat in between something. It's like, then that's all fine. Like, it should be there. But I still like overall, I'm like very like, I'm going to flip my staff and go, da, 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 cheese for everyone. Oh, Haskell, he's such a funny chap.
I've set him off. I've set him off. Look what I've done. Look what I have done. All right. Hot take. I saw a hot take saying Scott secretly likes Sheogorath. Totally agree.
I
what
don't-
other
I
hot
don't
takes do you
dislike
two
him.
have?
I don't-
No.
I
We're
just
moving
think it's
on. It's all right.
poorly
It's all right. It's all right. We all like him.
Worst Daedric Prince ever. There's a hot take for you.
I saw a
don't
good one.
know.
It was like the Daedric Prince that only middle schoolers would worship. Oh my god, XD is so random.
Yes, yeah. No, but like, look, he's not the worst Daedric Prince. Like, I think there's, to be honest, there's all of the Daedric Princes have had enough. There's been enough years and enough lore written in all of them that there's all got some exciting kind of component of them to some degree. Like, I don't really.
Josh Jones says, spicy take, stealth archer is more challenging and satisfying than any other build. Satisfying is not a hot take. Everyone says that. But challenging, I disagree.
I don't even think satisfying.
I mean, I don't know. I do.
A
Yeah,
mage is
I
much
do.
more satisfying, and I would argue that an aggressive archer is more exciting than a stealth archer.
I
Because
guess
a stealth
depends-
archer, so like, sorry to interrupt, but say you do several builds and you become a stealth archer again. Every time you infiltrate a different camp, bandit camp or whatever, you're going to do it exactly the same way. You're never going to be challenged because unless you have potato aim, you're going to hit everyone. You're going to one-hit kill them all because you're stealth multipliers and whatnot. Whereas if you go in like Legolas, kind of like fast firing, they're running at you. You've got moving targets. You need a modicum of skill. Then that's much more entertaining. And then, firing balls of exploding fire is more interesting than a bit of archery that we can all do at any time.
I've got this isn't a hot take, but it's a funny comment. I just want to valid username says, so I got this really spicy take I've been sitting on for a while, and I was a little scared to share. Wait, no, Michael, I'm not done talking. Don't end the episode.
I was gonna save that until the end.
Look, all I'll say is that off camera, I've been designated
off
as
camera.
the episode ender.
Yeah.
If I don't do it to spite me, they'll drag it out and then they'll hit me up on all the chat apps. Like, quick, wrap it up, Michael. Wrap it up.
No way, mate.
Wrap it
No
up now.
way.
Quick.
But
Scott's running off to eat breakfast.
get out of it, son.
I could sit here for 12 hours. It would be totally fine.
What episode was it where I didn't want to end it? So we actually went on and we were rating cities, and I'm like, no, I'm not ending it. So we went and we
did all
the,
of Skyrim,
Oblivion cities and Morrowind. That was actually good.
I don't know. This is another comment, but I'm not sure what it's referencing to. But like Emily DeFrancis says, "FudgeMuppet, come for the spicy takes, stay for the existential dread." What was that? What was that in reference to? Do you even remember?
There's plenty of examples, like just before you saying, "Oh yeah, nothing has any meaning." You can just
right. I guess
you always somehow find a way to talk about the fact that life is meaningless.
Well,
but then we add on it because I'm somewhat anti-nihilist, right? I mean, I am, and like so it's kind of like realize it, and then just give stuff meaning.
It's not
Choose to live in the subjective, because that's the only option you've got.
It's the difference between. It's not that there's no meaning. It's that there is no. Probably, we still don't know, but there is no preordained meaning. So you create your own meaning, and everyone creates meaning from everything. Like so it's not really.
We're all just LARPing.
I think there's a whole lot of pressure. It's a really weird pressure that you need some sort of like existential, universal, preordained sort of meaning to life question for your life to be worth living. Like you can just wake up the next day and go like, I like the taste of grapes, and like eat grapes sitting on a beach and be like, yeah, this is the life.
Hey, did you know that they did surgery on a grape?
This is a bit dark, but I'm just imagining, Scott, you're trying to talk someone down from a ledge and you've got grapes. You're like, no, please don't jump. Look, grapes, they're so good.
Have you considered that tomorrow you may wake up and want to eat a grape?
Yeah.
Adekin hot take. Dunmer, arguably the most boring of the playable Mer races.
Yeah,
too long didn't read. The Dunmer rely too much on the Elder Scrolls 3 and the Tribunal. Much of the other lore is more boring. I feel as though if Morrowind weren't a thing, many people wouldn't have them as their favorite. Of course, games bolster a race's popularity, and many know that, but it feels as though much of the fandom overhypes them and looks down on the other races and their fans, when really much of their fame comes from dull roots. Not only that, but Bosma, Altma, Orsma, and the Khajiit all have a lot more interesting lore, from my personal opinion. Combine this with much of the Dunmeri overhype, the actual lore behind the Dark Elves makes their arrogance unfounded. If Almcivi wasn't around, the people themselves would be far more dull. But I feel like that's kind of saying, like, if X lore didn't exist, and this lore didn't exist, and that...
If Morrowind as a game did not exist, and there were no, like, tribunal gods, or there weren't any interesting components about them at all, then they would be a boring race. I agree. If there was nothing about the Dark Elves, and it's just that, oh, we're grey-skinned elves, and nothing else... Of course it's going to be boring, but like it's because of everything that is there, all of the house interactions, the religious transformations, the culture, the tribunal gods themselves. Like, also, Morrowind, I would actually, here's a hot take for you. If Morrowind wasn't Morrowind, and it wasn't as like cool and interested in lore and so on, I think Elder Scrolls as a whole could have died off.
Well, didn't they say it was kind of like
a
savior?
Morrowind was the thing that saved it, but I think if they just presented some standard sort of like fantasy RPG kind of flavor to it, I think it would have... I don't think Elder Scrolls would be as successful as it is today, because I think the Morrowind thing really did bring a whole bunch of like hardcore sort of people, like, because you've got to have like that sort of interesting like buy-in, you know what I mean? When someone starts the game and there's like, there's this crazy world to explore and it's already... You know what I mean? Like all this...
Especially back then too, when arguably people did make more alien settings and they weren't afraid to.
Yeah.
You know, where now obviously it's kind of like, oh, we know that a Witcher or Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones type looking world is gonna sell.
Wait.
We know it's gonna sell.
Are you saying Legacy of the Bretons, going to High Isle, is not adventurous and alien?
I can't find it right now, but I saw a hot take saying Bretons are the most overhyped race, and I didn't know they were overhyped.
Yeah, I feel like they're like...
I thought they're the unpopular race.
I mean, they are over... They're surprisingly loved.
Okay, hold on. Here's a fun, like, interspersed thing. Let's go through the races real quick, right, out of the lore, and I just want to, like, a rating for them all. So just whether we think, just to put it out there, so underrated, highly, overrated, or properly rated. So,
Okay.
like Ultima, high elves.
Underrated.
I would say fairly rated.
I'm almost like fairly rated to overrated almost. Like it's like theoretically, it's like if there was all of that cool crystalline tower and Somerset was all crazy different stuff. But outside of that, to me they're the most straight out of Tolkien elves.
Well, see, I think people write them off as that, but there is more to it than that.
I just feel like
look, this was a bad decision because we could spend like 10 minutes
Yeah.
on each
Well,
one.
okay. Let's move
let's
on.
just
Then.
go
We'll
the-
just do our initial.
Yeah, so
thoughts.
I'll go. I'll just say
refuse to
properly.
elaborate.
Argonians.
I would probably say. It depends.
I'm
'Cause
gonna overrate
honestly,
it.
I would say it's underrated, but then there's this super niche community that is very loud and makes them look very overrated. But I feel like that most people don't actually consider them favorites at all. I feel like it's a very loud minority that likes Argonians.
I'd say, fairly rated.
I'm gonna 100% on the
Okay.
overrated for Argonians. I think.
All right.
Bosma, I would say underrated.
Yeah, me too.
Fairly rated.
Okay.
Bretons,
Overrated.
I think. The reason I'll say overrated is because there are some people they're not that good for what the reason they like. Some people just love Bretons, and I don't really get the reason.
I'd say fair. I think there's just stuff on both sides.
Dunmer, I'd say overrated.
Overrated, but still really good.
Just because
Yeah.
something's
Yeah, of
overrated
course, of
doesn't
course.
mean. By the
I'd
way,
say
just to
fairly,
clarify,
I'd say fairly rated.
I think
I think
there are
they're the
some
coolest
people that do
race.
take. Probably people even think that I think this, but like I am fully aware that the Dunmer, like to the degree at which they are overrated, they're really great. Like as a race creator, they're way up here. But like sometimes people really do treat it as it's like ridiculously above everything else.
It's
Like
kind of like treating it like instead of saying like I personally, I don't know, let's just use numbers for sake of it, 9 out of 10 coolness. They treat it like a 20 out of 10,
Yeah.
which is why we're saying overrated.
Like I think they're the best Elder Scrolls race, but if they weren't, like people rate them, I feel like even like higher than a theoretical like
Yeah,
best
of course.
position, if you know what I mean. Like just
Exactly.
I don't know. Imperials.
I'd say fair.
Imperials. I'd probably say
Underrated.
underrated. Yeah.
Yeah, because not really anyone likes them particularly that much.
Yeah.
There's a few. I think was it Brazen Cyrus saying they were his favorite.
And I mean, if you do look at all the Empire histories and stuff, which are culturally intertwined with the Imperials and stuff, there's some cool stuff there that I think just doesn't get.
Yeah.
I think people just go, oh, fantasy Romans, and then dismiss them.
Yeah.
Khajiit,
Again,
Fair.
like I'd say fair. I think like they're pretty good.
See,
there is that really noisy minority like Argonians that love Khajiit.
I'll say fairly rated there because, like, to compare it to what I was saying, overrated to Argonians, I think as a race, Khajiit are way above Argonians in terms of, like, their culture, their even interest in biology and everything, whereas I feel like the love for them is somewhat like, yeah, those people that really love both of them, or, like, it's quite somewhat on par almost, but it's just like, no, the Khajiit sort of deserve that spot. The Argonians are really good, too. It's just, I do think they're just a bit overrated. Like, they're not that good.
They are. They're cool. They're really, really cool.
The Khajiit
Yeah,
would have been
alright.
overrated before the expansion.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Then they were really that meme, Puss in Boots, kind of like Khajiit have wares if you have coin.
Yeah.
If I see that in the comments now, I know it's just to annoy me. I know it. No one's saying it legit. All right. What else?
Nords.
Underrated.
I would actually say
Properly.
underrated by the wider community. Like not because they became the stock standard race and people ignored the cool stuff about them.
Well, because you know that meme that's like, you're playing in a fantasy universe and you chose to be a white guy or something like that. It's like, well, if you can easily say that about the Nords, but if you actually know, to be fair, Skyrim doesn't do it a lot of favors, but if you actually know their lore, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, Nords are pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd still say properly rated though. I think they're like as much. There are lots of people out there that love the traditional Nordic
yeah.
stuff, and lots of it's out there.
But that's all right. I mean, yeah, they're
Yeah.
definitely not.
Well, I think Vikings are
As a
overrated.
concept,
Yeah, yeah,
as a
for
concept,
sure,
like
yeah.
they're done to death.
Agree.
Orcs underrated, I think.
Yep.
Yep.
And Red Guards, I say underrated.
I'd
Yeah.
say they're very underrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Red Guards.
Same.
Yeah.
Which maybe they won't be after Elder Scrolls 6.
So yeah, I guess, yeah. Yeah, there you go. There's a fun. So there, we can kind of where we vaguely stand on what we actually think of the the different elven races in general.
Jacob Maguire says, hot take, the Godhead is not a cool theory. The actual cool parts of the Godhead theory, like Amaranth, Kim, and Zero Summing make it seem cool. It was all just a dream is not actually that radical or esoteric of a concept. I agree in general. I don't think it's that cool, but I don't hate it or think it's bad either. I don't mind it. I just let it sit there as that part of the lore that when I remember it, I'm like, oh yeah, but I don't.
I don't like it, but I think it would only really rub me the wrong way if it played a more serious role in the lore.
Yeah,
like it's kind of that extra level of external that it's irrelevant. It doesn't even matter that it's a dream.
It's almost like looking at real life and being like, maybe this is all a simulation. And, you know, if some out-of-world characters role-playing us knew that it was just a simulation, it still doesn't make the world less cool.
I don't know. If I lived in the Matrix, man, and all of a sudden I knew it's the Matrix, but I, like, enjoy my life and everything, like, it's kind of fine. Like, everyone, like, for example, if you're playing a game where you actively engage in role-playing and all of this lore, which is inherently all fantasy, which is already all made up, it's not real, as in you understand, like, real. It's not part of your reality. If you're so invested in it, the idea of someone telling you that it's not real, that it's in the dream of something as a godhead or something like that, it's not. It shouldn't break your like reality.
Here comes the extra dose of the double dose of existential dread.
Yeah, I just do know, but it's not even extra. It's a very. I think it's a rather positive outlook, but that just because something isn't real material means it's invaluable. Like your dreams and aspirations aren't real until they're materialized, but that doesn't mean they're not valuable, or it doesn't mean that your stories that you create and stuff that are in your head or that you write down, they're not valuable.
But in
would
general,
you take the red pill or the blue pill?
Me,
depends how bleak the red pill is.
The problem is I know myself.
You don't know.
I know myself. I'd probably take the red pill, even if I did like the blue pill. I'm just too curious. Like,
I'd take the blue pill every single day.
I think I'd be in a similar situation where I'd take the red, but maybe potentially regret it later. But I think I would do it if given the choice, because I don't know. Like we've said before on the podcast, talking about some lore, truth is overrated. But I'm a sucker for truth, and I probably would want to know what it is.
So now that we know who's red-pilled and who's blue-pilled, like
I'll keep living the dream.
Cringe and blue-pilled, bro.
Look, bro, I've got Elder Scrolls. You don't. You get gruel and like frayed jumpers. That's all you've got.
Yeah, but I can go back in and then like become like...
Yeah, but you go back in, but you know. You'll never enjoy things truly again.
I don't know if that's true. Like, I still enjoy...
I don't know. He's pretty good at role playing.
Yeah, I enjoy games and role playing and all that kind of stuff, and I get into it, and it's like, you both know it's not real, but it doesn't stop my enjoyment of it, because I'm also buying into the idea that it's like real
also,
in the temporary.
This sounds kind of strange, but if this was all some like simulation, it kind of can give a little bit of more hope as for an afterlife, because you're like, is it going to be like Rick and Morty where I take my VR headset off and there's two aliens and they're like, whoa, bro, you did really well. At least it's not the end.
Yeah.
It's more bleak if the truth was...
I wish the world were more like Rick and Morty.
Rotting away.
And I guess, by the way, like, it's like if you in that Matrix scenario too, it's just like, if I knew that the red pill is literally going to take me to exactly what's depicted in that film, and then sure.
You just get taken to the set of the Matrix.
Yeah, but like if I didn't know, that's what would really drive it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. But here's another good one. Daedrula says, hot take: there isn't enough incest in the Elder Scrolls for being a fantasy setting. Mm-hmm. Why isn't Jarl Balgruuf not trying to snag his sister's coin purse? Tari and Dari don't spend quality time behind the winking skeever when the store closes? ? But not enough incest in the Elder Scrolls.
All right, how do we... There's so many ways you can come at this, so to speak.
I don't mind. I don't mind him in the story. It's interesting, like
don't mind
different
a bit of
cultural
incest?
takes. Yeah, in stories and different cultures and so on. Like it also depends what you consider it. Like throughout the Middle East and stuff, there's lots of like first cousin marriages and stuff like that they're just not viewed the same. As,
I think
Egyptians and they're like
to dodge the meme. I think if you're gonna implement it in an actually interesting way, would be to have it be prevalent in Somerset.
yeah.
Because that makes a lot of sense. If they're obsessed with purity, which is obviously exaggerated to an extent, but if the higher nobility are obsessed with purity, they'd all be marrying their cousins and their sisters maybe. And that would be how they deal with their
It's probably something
monarchy.
that should have been addressed even with like the Septim Empire and stuff and trying to get like more Septim blood and all that kind of stuff. Like, and you don't have to be like ridiculous about it. Like I know there's the whole like obviously like people like just get on the fetish of it and stuff and like the sort of Game of Thrones like we want more like incest, so let's pump it in. But more so in a sort of cultural sense as like a sort of like harsh reality of some worlds. Something they're interesting. Like it just makes it a bit more like I don't know.
Yeah, cool. That was a cool take.
Yeah. There you go.
Very cool.
Okay. Oh, by the way, this is unrelated, but I was right. I didn't get TikTok memed. The whole transferring the money between banks, they have to use like actual cash check or a third-party app. And apparently checks were a still thing like lasting a lot longer there and so on. So yeah, that's crazy.
That's a real deja vu time skip for me because I thought you said that in part 1 and we addressed it in part 2, but maybe we didn't. And you just told me personally.
Yeah,
I told you
IRL,
personally, I think.
because I'm like, heard this before.
All right. Okay, hot take. Spring-heeled Jacobite. It's kind of a smallish hot take, but like there being no female Briarhearts completely goes against the Bretons and Forsworn's druidic nature. I get that the Briarheart's some sort of resurrected warrior, but how can there be a cycle of life without a female? Hot take. I honestly feel like the real reason is just the gameplay. They just like, let's just do one male model with the Briarheart things. I don't really think it's a... I agree.
They did do some models for like the female designs a bit dirty sometimes, like the Telvanni robes. You know how you can... Wasn't there a problem with the one with the hole in it from the quest?
Yeah, so basically in the default like Telvanni robe, you the only way you really get the Telvanni robe is by like looting it from that chick with the heartstone on. But so if you wear it as a female version, it's got that like strap with like the whole thing on it. And the male version of it, like in the game, is what Nelos's wearing. So if you're a male and you wear it, it looks normal. But if you're wearing a female wearing it, it's got like that whole thing on it.
So unfair.
Well, like ages, that was like 360 days. But I remember that annoyed me so much.
Oh, I'm assuming they patched it then.
Maybe, or maybe not even.
Or maybe it's just mods and unofficial stuff.
Yeah.
Who knows anymore what we've added and what's not added.
Yeah. The hot take, the Talos ban is justified. I mean, it's who it's not a ban. I just understand that like Tiber Septim was a bad dude, but like where it's coming from, but not from like elves. I mean, I don't think it's justified to have the elves come and like tell you what you got to do.
Yeah, well, you could apply that to any kind of free worship in Tamriel. Is that you can't really justify telling them not to worship anyone. I guess maybe if they're worshipping Molag Bal or something and then enslaving their neighbors, you could make that argument. But yeah, I didn't think that one through too much.
All right. I'm running out of hot takes.
I completely zoned out for that one, but I'm getting some texts. It says, hot take, Michael, we need you to wrap up this podcast. It's from Drew.
Oh, God. No, let's go another hour.
Yeah, let's... Okay.
I actually just running out is my main reason.
Here is one. It's a legitimate one we can talk about. Ollie says, my hot take, Skyrim did High Elves dirty. Loved playing a High Elf in Oblivion. When I first booted up Skyrim to find out they're now these irredeemable baddies, I found it pretty disappointing. The Great War and Thalmor are great from a narrative perspective, but I wish we got more of an anti-Thalmor sentiment from the High Elves who chose to leave Somerset to live amongst men. I kind of like that's a good like take, but I also do you know what? I would even go a step further, say that I think the Thalmor should have been they should have had more redeemable qualities. I think generally they should have gone through I like the sort of princess Queen Irene sort of take where it's like, you know, man, they're young and they're you know, they're like wild and so on. We've got to have this ancient race of wisdom to like look after the world, so on. So they get this sort of like righteous kind of energy, but rather than this sort of men are filth that need to be eradicated, it's instead of like we have to guide the younger races, and that might not be justified, but it's kind of good. I think it would be better if they changed that up. I generally think, is my hot take, I think every single faction in any sort of thing should not be wholly good or wholly bad. Like, there should always be some level of like consideration. Like, you can go like maybe, I don't know, like you're 70% bad, 30% good, kind of fine. But I find it's always way more interesting when you have to pick from lots of like kind of horrible factions. I don't know. Like, here we go. Like I'm going to shill Kenshi again, but in Kenshi, all of the factions are like horrible. Like, the big factions, the small ones are fine, but none of them are redeemable. Really, they're not good. It's like a big zealous, misogynistic sort of like a holy nation kind of group, and they also have slavery, but then there's this other thing that's like, yeah, free cities and economy, but then they've got like this feudal kind of stuff with like slavery and all of this kind of stuff, and then the other one, you've got like this big giant of basically like Mongols, essentially. They just go around like warlords, like taking everything and obsess about combat and so on, and burn villages and such, and then there's all kinds of bandit stuff in between. But the point is, it's just like, it actually makes it an interesting sort of choice, if that makes sense, if you don't have to choose in that. But in most games, I think it's far more interesting to pick if there are things that are a bit more, like, for example, like, I mean, you could even criticize New Vegas for it somewhat, but like not criticize it, because the Legion is an interesting faction, but like, there's a little bit of wiggle room there. You can justify it from a role-playing perspective. But the Caesar's Legion is like, pretty on the whole, it's bad, it's very bad. But if they made it like an NCR is like kind of like the clearer option of those two, but it's much better. I find the interesting sort of things that's like, if it's like, you know, between NCR or House or like Independent, like there's more like wiggle room in there, and it makes it more of a compelling choice to make. And I don't know. Yeah,
I agree. You know what Billy Bish thinks? Hot take: Khajiit are overrated and Argonians are completely underrated. Khajiit keep getting the praise of cool and alien, while Argonians are thrown to the lizard people motif. Argonians are tree-worshipping, immortal, hyper-intelligent, hive-mind reptilians. They breathe underwater. Oh, the cat people look in the dark. Cat people diverse on the moon. Argonians can change their gender on a whim, build muscle mass by drinking the sap of their gods. Boo Khajiit, hail to the lizard folk. They grow leaves for hair, can grow feathers, live forever. ETC.
No. Is that no?
That's all he's got to say.
I mean, I'd if I had to throw any kind of bone, I'd say the disparity between the two isn't huge. Like, they're both kind of almost as interesting as each other. I just think Khajiit very slightly outweigh them.
I think Khajiit are much more interesting in terms of their like culture and so on. I think the Argonians have been reduced somewhat simplistic. It's like, we used to worship Sithis, and now it's just the Hist, and you know, they've got their lizard, their biology stuff's by far the most interesting part. But their culture is like, we're like tribes basically of different lizard people that used to be like this big like sort of essentially like Aztec empire kind of vibe thing that worshipped Sithis. And this is all like good stuff, but it's just like, it's nowhere near as extensive really as even in terms of biology.
But they still worship Sithis. They just see Sithis in a different light. Instead of a destroyer, it's more like a destroyer for the sake of change. And
but like
they embrace the impermanence aspect more than the fear and destruction.
I just think Argonian lore is good and everything, but like comparing it to Khajiit, I just think Khajiit, they've had a whole province. Like I said, like the ESO thing really did like boost it up. Like, but I think the Khajiit are just
I think your summary of Argonians is always like, they're good, but they're bad.
But it's not. It's not that they're bad. It's just this is why I just do think they're overrated. Like, I don't know what the big thing is. Like, what's the cool like kind of
Here's another one
even
by
this, it's like,
Shaftocrat.
hold on, real quick.
Argonians are better.
The root,
than-
like the root, even their god is just basically, saying that I want things to be a caricature, but it's like everything is just like, the root god with the snake or whatever it is. I forgot the attack and the root or something. It's just like their god is like kind of like the reasons I find like Skull more boring, because it's just kind of like, here's your Anu and Padme kind of vibe, or like, and
but their god it's about a serpent, like. And the root and all this.
Yeah,
it gets all complicated.
It's kind of like kind of like Yakutan mythology, but without all of the other gods, like just the start with this.
Oh, I understand that aspect of it. I suppose I don't know. I feel like the Khajiit also, everything's a cat and a litter.
Yeah, but like all of the
maiden.
characters in themselves as like the Daedra gods, and
course.
in their interplay and everything, and even the whole like.
I think the thing is, at the end of the
broader-
day, Daedra are just such an interesting thing. So any culture that adds any Daedric princes to their pantheon just automatically will get like a coolness boost.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I just think I don't know. Argonians, I definitely think do get overrated, but they're still good. Like
See, he be saying they good, but they're bad.
They're good, but they're
still
bad.
Good.
They just I just don't I don't really get it. Like as a general rule, both of the Elder Scrolls beast races look very like, like I said, BoJack Horseman kind of vibe. Like they're not particularly like inspired until they've had lots of work done on them. For example, like the Naga Argonians look way cooler and like.
So I mean, I just looked at a bunch of hot takes and found one in there that I think I agree with, but it's fairly hardcore.
Okay.
Steely Boy Meme Lord says, hot take, being able to save, in parentheses, as much as you can in Elder Scrolls games detracts from the experience, e.g. crime, bounty, and negative events like your follower dying that could be an interesting role-playing experience that you don't get if you just load the game. So perhaps removing the ability to save at will and perhaps having it in very specific locations.
The reason I'm against it generally, but I understand what he's trying to say. But I would say the problem is Elder Scrolls doesn't have a lot of the time fun negatives. So like, I'm going to shill Kenshi again because I can. But like a fun negative, if you get beaten down really hard and these slaver dudes, they arrest you and go, now you're a slave and now you got to break out of slavery and you're starting from scratch and all of that kind of stuff, right? But it creates the negative part of it creates a fun story for your role playing. If in Skyrim it's just like, or something's like, this NPC, died or something, or a dragon killed them, or you kill this NPC, or you fail some kind of thing. They never give you like, this is a fun role playing continuation for it. It's just, you now get less content. Now you get less stuff. It's this sort of, we talked about, like, I don't like in Cyberpunk, it's not like, a lot of the time, it's like you failing a quest is not fun unless if you fail an objective in a way and that changes the world or the story in some way, that's an interesting consequence. Like, it's a choice and a consequence. But if it's just like, now you just can't finish the thing, it's like you just cut off from it, or it's not going to actually recognize these, like, the big L's you're taking, like, it doesn't become, and I just don't think they'll.
I think I agree with both, because I like this idea presented in the take, but I also think you need to work the mechanics of the game around it.
Yeah.
So even if it's not as extensive as Kenshi, simply having it that you could say you can only save at a player home or a bed or something like that, a bed that you've rented or you own, and then you go out on an adventure wearing your best armor and your best gear, and you die. Maybe if everything gets dropped and you're woken up by one of various reasons, like a healer finds you and restores you, and you're somewhere else in the back of a cart, and you've got to like retrace your steps to get your stuff back. That could create for those good experiences. But currently, there's not much to lose.
I guess my point would be that I like the save system as is, and I wouldn't change it. I would just add some extra options for failing and leave it up to the player. I don't want to police someone else's role playing. Like, if somebody, like, look, there are some times where I have decided for role playing reasons that I actually want to use the save function. And I know that sounds a bit like contradictory and strange at first, but like, for example, say you get sent to jail and you have one lockpick. And in the story that you're making, you just thought it would be cool if your character broke out of jail with this one lockpick. I'm going to save it. Like, I'm not saying this is what I do every time. I'm just saying I've done this and I've loaded back and then just unlocked it. And I was like, oh yeah, that happened. And I pretend in my head that happened the first time. and that enhanced the story for me in that particular playthrough. Right.
So in so many words, you're a save scummer, is what they'll say.
What I'm saying is, it's not. I agree with the sentiment of what they're saying, but I just think that look, I'm the only honest one here saying I've done that, and it added.
I haven't said
from a role playing perspective, it added, and oftentimes though, like if you want to incentivize people to not do that, by all means do it by adding in the things that you talked about. I mean, I've put it in our recent, or it could have been the one before. Video on 5 things we want in the Elder Scrolls 6, where I talked about like all these options for when your character is defeated or downed. Like you could be captured by vampires and then break out, or let that be the way that your character became a vampire. All that stuff's cool, but I don't think you need to necessarily gut saving
at the
for
end
that to happen. Also, dude, what you have I would hate if there was back in the day like a power outage or some tech issue, and it's like I lost
and bugs
hours
and
of
everything.
progress because I didn't sleep, or bugs. And
like I 100% agree. I don't want
to be bugs.
I'm all for 100% for saving and leave it up to the player and everything. But at the end of the day, like for example, in Kenshi, you can save whenever you want, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You can save scum in Kenshi. However, it's actually rewarding from a satisfying point of the player to lose and then get back up again. And because of that, it leads you to not save scum. Like I've saved scum plenty of times in games before, and I do it plenty of times if I feel like it. Like I want it straight up. Like I want it to go this way, and it didn't go this way, so I'm going to load back and try that again or something, right?
And other times you don't.
But in Kenshi, is actually, or if it rewards you for doing it, and the same thing is, Elder Scrolls took that. If there is actually a fun experience, a unique experience from a role-playing perspective, if you go out, arguably sometimes there is in Skyrim. Like in the recent Let's Play, it was like I screwed up the assassination, like basically, and all the guards went after me, and then I went on like a psychotic killing spree of them, right? But like that's kind of like giving a role-playing sort of angle to it. I could sort of work into it or something. But sometimes it's fun to have consequences, but the consequences in Skyrim are usually nothing interesting.
Also, sometimes you just get so unlucky. Like I know some people can embrace it. Sometimes I do. However, on certain playthroughs, if I go to Riverwood and a dragon shows up and kills everything, like NPCs that I don't know. Sometimes I just like all the NPCs being alive in the world that I didn't kill. Then I'll load back so that they're still alive, and something out of my control didn't cause half of a town to get burnt to a crisp.
Yeah, I think it is the case of it's a good idea depending on the game, but for Elder Scrolls, not so much. Like, yeah, because if I thought of something like playing a Nuzlocke in Pokemon, you know, and you've got your favorite Pokemon comes out and the enemy gets a freak critical hit on you, kills your best Pokemon, do you then reload? Or do you deal with that fact? And it's obviously so much more fun to deal with it, but that's essentially what you're saying with Kenshi as well, that it's just not suited to Elder Scrolls currently.
Yeah.
But it could be a good idea
but
for
like
hardcore
even in
players.
so like all the things, like I said, mentioned, like doing a Nuzlocke is a fun challenge kind of thing for people. Like there's still the player choice to do it, and even
it's self-imposed.
Yeah.
Which could be a feature of a hardcore mode in Elder Scrolls 6 without affecting the normal mode.
Yeah.
Ollie Ward Comics says, I got no hot takes. I just love the Elder Scrolls and I love this podcast. So thank you very much.
Thanks, King.
Thank you.
Here's a, I don't know if this is a hot take. Well, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, is this hot or not? I'm not sure. But like Jared Baker probably is. Hot take, the Dwemer are extremely overrated as a lore topic within the Elder Scrolls community. The absence of something alone does not make that thing interesting. And that is the entirety of the draw for Dwemer for the fans. Like forced mimetic mystery. How about a dragon break to erase them from the lore completely? We'd all be better off. I don't think that's the only reason. Like people look at the cool like machines and stuff. It's the idea that they're like everyone gets off on the sort of like prior ancient advanced race when we can't replicate their technology. It's a cool concept, but
things like it's just kind of human nature that things we don't understand are more interesting to us. It's part of the reason why, you know, I love the Falmer, I love the Aliads, and I love the Dwemer. They're three of my favorite races, despite knowing next to nothing about them compared to the playable races. And I think it's the case in just all aspects. But I like it. I like the mystery.
I would like I like the mystery and everything too. But I would agree on the extremely overrated. I think they do get like you often see like people get really obsessed. I don't think they're that like. For example, I am more interested in the Aelids over the Dwemer. Or I would be more interested in the Chimera or others. Like I do sometimes think the Dwemer, Like
in the way the Dwemer are tied in with the Dark Elf lore and Morrowind's lore and dealing with the Heart of Lorkhan, the tools and their creations, I think I struggle to say they'd be overrated. Honestly, I feel like it's fair.
But remember, overrated is how you've got to, obviously, any underrated, mid-rated, overrated, you've got to take into consideration of how the community, how people broadly see it, because that's how its ranking is there. Like if you see a Avengers or something and it's got like 90 to 80% or something on Rotten Tomatoes, right? You might be like, oh, that's overrated, clearly, right? It's not correct.
Objectively.
Because it's based on everyone's collective opinion. So, but I do see heaps of like of Dwemer simping, but everyone's all for it. Like, I do think they are like, they're really cool, but like, chill, they're not cool. Like, that's the same thing I was saying with the Dunmer. I think they do get to an overrated extent. I think people like play it up too much.
Agree.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So, there you go. Whatever.
Here we go.
No, I don't think I have to start with that one. I'll not do it. But yeah,
we can save some of these for next time too.
What are you saying, Michael?
I heard Scott's voice trail off going, I think that's my cue. We've trained. That's my training cue to jump in and say thank you everyone for watching this. Scott, do you have any final words, any final hot takes? I don't know if we'll do a part 4 like not next week but the week after. I mean, we might, but we may save it for like a month away or something like that to really like
stew on it.
To really stew on it, and we can cover some other topics.
I feel like we got
maybe get people's theories in.
Yeah, theories,
you know, and
would
do a
actually
theories
be
video.
nice. Like good theories too.
Yeah.
Don't just send it a theory. I mean, like if
Nazim
it's funny,
is the real Dragon Ball.
yeah. Like we get a lot of those. But if you have any like really good theories, send them in. I mean, if they're really good and we discuss them on the podcast, maybe we'll actually give them a dedicated video and give you credit for inspiring such a video. As always, social media links are down in the comments section below. Thank you all for tuning in, and we look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.